Hi and welcome. This is going to be a tutorial on one of the most basic but one of the most important parts about digital art, layers. There are a lot of different programs that you can use to create digital art. You can get a lot of free apps on your devices like phones, iPads, and other things. There are apps like Ibis Paint X, Autodesk Sketchbook, Medibang, and Procreate. And it's good to try out a bunch of different apps, that way you can see which one you like the best and utilize that. For this tutorial, I'll be using Procreate on my iPad, but even if you aren't using Procreate, most of the tools will stay consistent across different art programs, and the only thing is you'll just have to figure out where they are, because it'll be located most often in a different location. But not using Procreate doesn't really change anything, and you can still follow along and do this tutorial. A lot of the general tools that will be consistent will include the brush tool to actually make your strokes, an eraser to erase those strokes if you have mistakes, a color changer to pick your color, and a brush changer to adjust the different settings and play around with a bunch of nice brushes that you can use to draw with. In this tutorial, I'll mainly be focusing on the layer functions of digital art. You can think of layers as like independent drawings that don't mix with each other. And the best thing that this tool gives over traditional art is that you're able to physically separate different components of your piece and you can manipulate them individually. You only change one little part of your piece. For example, these pieces of paper that I have are individually shapes that are independent of each other and they don't affect each other. You can arrange them like this and it makes this Kirby, but when I move this shape around, the other shapes are still kept normally. I can make a change and the other ones will remain intact. This can be helpful so that you don't need to edit the entire thing and you can change things about one little piece of your art instead of changing the entire thing. And an example of how you could use this is that a lot of different artists will use different layers to separate their line art from their colors, and that makes it a lot easier, so if you make a mistake, you can edit it easier than if you didn't have that separation. And to demonstrate how to use the layer tool and what it can do, I'll be drawing a Kirby and showing you guys how to do this too. So the first step for this Kirby is to pick a pink color, and this will just be the base of your entire Kirby. So what you want to do is you want to make a big circle, and that's going to be the body of the Kirby, as you can see on like the left side. And what I did to make it easier is I just made the brush really big, so it was almost like just a stamp of a circle. Now I'm going to draw Kirby's arms here. They're also pink, and I'm just going to make an addition onto the big circular body of Kirby. Every time you see that the lines disappear or reappear when I'm drawing, it's because I'm undoing and redoing because I don't like the way it looks. So you can just undo and redo as many times as you need to. And on Procreate, those buttons are on the bottom left of the screen underneath the sliders. But for most programs, I think it's probably going to be near the top of the screen. You can also double tap your fingers, two of them at the same time, to undo. Here, I'm also renaming the layer light pink, and this is just so I can differentiate between my layers and be able to see them easier. And that's another plus side of layers, organization. Now here, I just made another layer using the plus button at the top right, and I'm selecting my brush again. It's just the same brush, and I'm selecting a red color, and it's going to be for Kirby's feet. Now this drawing that's happening is on this new layer, so it's like a separate painting on top of this one basically. And I'm drawing Kirby's feet in a little triangle shape because that's what Kirby's feet look like in this image that we're referencing from. So I'm just going to draw it like that. And again, I'm doing and redoing because I'm messing up a lot. So now I finally got my feet how I wanted them to look. So what I'm doing now is I'm renaming this layer red for more organization. Now, over here on the Kirby on the left-hand side, you can see that the feet are actually behind the pink, and that's what it looks like, where our feet are above. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to drag it below the pink layer. So now the feet kind of look like the one in the reference, and they're below the actual body. So it looks normal and more like Kirby. What I'm doing now is I'm again just cleaning it up because I still don't like the way that my feet look. And what I'm doing is I'm just using the eraser tool to clean up the edges. You don't need to do this if you're happy with the way yours looks, but I'm just editing mine still. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another layer and I'm going to choose the color black instead. Now we're going to do Kirby's eyes, so it was probably better to use a smaller brush tool than the ones that you've been using for the feet and the body. And what it is basically just two black lines, kind of like that. And there's the mouth of Kirby. And again, I'm just cleaning it up. Kirby has little whites in its eyes, so I'm going to take white and I'm also just going to go in and draw that. And Kirby also has blue in its eyes, and now I'm going to draw that. And I'm keeping all this on the same layer just for the sake of it, because I want to organize the body, the feet, and the face in different layers. So those are the components that I want separated, so I'm going to keep it like that. And because it looks kind of weird, what I'm doing is I'm just taking the black, which is the tool, the color that's outside of the blue, and I'm just sharpening the blue basically. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to make the blush for Kirby by just adding these little circles on the side of Kirby. But also, if you want to do something a little more special, you can take a different brush, like maybe a softer one with more fuzzy edges, and you can make the cheeks more like a blush kind of thing and make it softer and not as hard. And now that I'm done with the blush, I'm just going to rename this layer Face. Some programs might not let you do that, but for Procreate, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you can rename your layers. So now I'm switching back over to the hard brush, and on the Kirby, you can see that there are these little layers of separation where there's kind of like darker colors, or like the shading, and you can use another function of layers to help you do this, and it's called the clipping mask. So over here, what I'm doing is I'm applying the clipping mask, so only this part of your canvas is actually being colored in, and it's because of the layers. You get that separation, so you can choose one layer that it applies to. Like over here, if I just begin to color outside when there's no clipping mask, it affects the whole canvas and it's hard to stay in that boundary. And then I turn on the clipping mask and it sets only onto the pink part of the Kirby. Now here what I'm doing is I'm just using the eraser to clean up the shading. And I'm choosing black for now because you just need a darker color so the shading and the shadows make sense. But you're going to do something to it later on to make it make a little bit more sense. And basically what I'm doing now is I'm just going to shape it to how the dark pink looks in the picture that we have on the left. You don't need to do this, however, I'm going to shape it like this. If you want, you can make the shadings in other ways that might make sense to you. For example, how I just did it without erasing the little arm parts. That can also work as shading. So now that I'm done with that, what I just did is I lowered the opacity, and that basically makes it so that the amount of black basically is reduced. So it's as if I took water basically and splashed it on the whole thing. So now it's like diluted color kind of. And now it looks more like shading and less just like really harsh black shadows. So I'm going to do the same thing that I just did to the red shoes where it is on the reference picture on the left, which is just those little corners at the bottom. And over there where there's white glints on the shoe, I'm also going to apply shading, and that's more of like light sources, so the shoes look a little shiny. And again, I'm going to lower the opacity, that way it's not the entire color. And now what I'm doing is I'm changing the blending mode. And what that does basically is it's kind of hard to know what each one does, but just playing around with these things can let you like have different ways that the black is basically applied to the layer below it. So you can just make things look prettier or brighter. Like the black here, I'm choosing the overlay blend mode, which makes it apply more to the color that it's using. So the black will look better on pink and the red will look better on that red when I use overlay on it. And the blend modes are just something that makes things look nice. Now, finally, I just created a new layer and I'm outlining the Kirby so it can look like the one on the left. You don't need to do this because I think it looks good in the state before you outline it, but this is just a little extra step that you can do. And this is my finished Kirby. using layers, and this is a really important tool that you'll use a lot in digital art, and it's something that you can't really do with the pencil and paper for traditional art. So I hope you enjoyed this and will continue to apply this to your future digital art projects. Bye!